Hello everyone, this is Masood Ramandi and I'm happy to be with you with another session from the New Man series. Today I want to pick up from where I left off in the last week's message, and we're going to look at something that perhaps is not in at first something that you would, you read it and you understand it, but when you begin to look into the details of this through the symbology of the Old Testament, you begin to understand the depth and the importance of what that is. And what I'm going to be talking to you about is the mountain of the Lord. Now, the reason I say this, because last week I talked about being an heir or being a slave, being a free person or being a slave person, being someone that receives the inheritance or being someone that doesn't receive it, being someone that is free from the elements of the world of the law, or being someone that is actually subject to the elements of that world of the law. Now, all of that, if you would have continued to read Galatians chapter 4, you would have realized that Paul begins to talk to basically the Jewish people, saying that even you in your own law, you have the story of Abraham, and you have the story of his two basically wives, and you have the story of the two sons that were born from those two wives, and these two basically are symbolic. Everything that is written about them is symbolic, and it's just amazing to see things like this are in the Bible, that they are clearly speaking of the historical event as symbolic precious truth that we can use. And instead of talking about once again in flesh, this nation, that nation, this tribe, that tribe, this gender or this language or whatever, we can look at them by the Spirit of God and understand what the message was in those stories. So anyways, Paul goes on to say that these two are symbolic. I mean, you know the story. I'm not going to spend so much time on this part of Galatians chapter 4, because I want to take you through some Old Testament scriptures. But look at for a minute to what he says in Galatians chapter 4, verse 24. It says, "These things are symbolic, for these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gives birth to bondage, which is Hagar." Okay, so it says two covenants. Everything that was mentioned about the two wives that brought forth two different sons, these speak of two covenants. And previously we also looked at that the law was added after the promise. So there was a covenant of promise, there was a covenant of the law. All right, so these two were basically, they showed themselves in the two wives of Abraham. So what it says is from Mount Sinai, the mountain of Sinai. And I said I'm going to be talking to you about the mountain of the Lord. What Sinai is not the mountain of the Lord. We're going to see what the mountain of the Lord is. And it says Sinai, in fact, doesn't give birth to sons. It gives birth to bondage, to those slaves that in the last week's message we looked at. Those who are under the element of the law, they are bound. They are under guardians, stewards, tutors. They're not free. They're not being taught by their father. They're not being trained by the father. They don't know who their father is. They don't know what he has, and they don't know what they have in him. And then he says, "For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. For it is written, Rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor. For the desolate has many more children than she who has a husband." Who is the one who had a husband? In the context, the first wife of Abraham, which was Hagar, or basically the first one that brought forth a son. And it says there was also a barren one. Who was that? Sarah. So it says we didn't have any child for Abraham from Sarah. The first child was from Hagar. And it says these are two covenants, trying to say God didn't have any children born from the covenant according to promise. Everyone that was born was according to the law. Okay, and then when Jesus came, he was the firstborn of the new covenant. Okay, he was the one that was born according to the promise. We looked at this last week, that the promise was made to Abraham that he would have a seed, and that came to Sarah after Hagar had given birth. So trying to say the two mountains represent the two covenants, because one is said to be Hagar and the other one is Sarah. Look at verse 28. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are the children of promise. Now, this is the children of the covenant of promise. But the covenants were two mountains. So you are the child of a certain mountain. Okay? You are the child of a certain mountain. You are born on a certain mountain. Now, quickly, let me show you something in the book of Revelation. Look at the book of Revelation and chapter 21. Verse 10. He carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain. To a great and high mountain. In the spirit. He carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain. That means this mountain is not a touchable mountain. It's not a natural mountain. It's not like Mount Sinai. Okay, it's a different type of mountain. It's a mountain in the spirit, upon which we read, he showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem. So on this mountain is the holy Jerusalem. All right. So far we are reading about basically the two covenants representing two mountains. But then the book of Revelation of Jesus Christ, which reveals Jesus Christ, begins to tell us that now there is a high and great mountain in the spirit, and John was carried there, and on this mountain he saw a woman, which is the bride of Christ, the holy Jerusalem. Now, let me take you to the book of Hebrews to first understand what this mountain is. Look at chapter 12 of the book of Hebrews. Verse 18, for you have not come to the mountain that may be touched. Okay, pause. You haven't come to a mountain that may be touched. But there are only two mountains that we looked at. One was Sinai, and there was another mountain that we're going to be finding what that mountain is. The first one is touchable. The second one, John said, it was in the spirit. It's not touchable. It's not a natural mountain. It's not in natural Israel in the Middle East, so you're not going to find that anywhere on this earth. So you shouldn't be looking for any mountain like that anywhere on this planet Earth. It is in the spirit. All right, we have to establish that first. So he says, you haven't come to this mountain. As these people, that the book of Hebrews was all about your conscience being purged so you can draw near and you can now be on this mountain, the new mountain. You haven't come to the old mountain. You haven't come to Sinai, which gives birth to bondage. You have come to a certain mountain. What that mountain is given to us in verse 22. But you have come to Mount Zion. All right. So the second mountain is Zion. Okay. So Zion is the new covenant of the Lord. It's a mountain that gives birth to heirs, not to slaves. Just as we read in Galatians chapter 4, we are like Isaac. We are not like Ishmael. Ishmael was not the heir. He was born of a slave woman. All right, and we looked at this in the last week's message again, that Christ came born of a woman, born under the law. Okay, born under the law. He himself was not born under the law, but the one that he was born from was born under the law. Okay, because before him, everyone was under the law. But he says he came out of her, and then obviously through the course of time, he grew in favor, stature, and basically wisdom with God. He began to recognize that I have a father, and he never again identified himself in the flesh. All right, so he began to see and hear the voice that told him that you are my beloved son. Okay, so he was the firstborn of the new covenant of the Lord. Anyways, so he says, you have come to this Mount Zion. Now he goes on to say, this is the city of the living God. Because remember, Revelation chapter 21 said there is a mountain, and top of this mountain is a city called the Holy Jerusalem. And he says, you have come to a mountain, and you have come to a city, and that city is the city of the living God. So that means whatever we are reading has nothing to do with something in the future once again. And when you put yourself under time, waiting for a future, you're subjecting yourself once again to the elements of the old world. We looked at that previously in the last week's message. And by doing so, you're making yourself a slave. You're going back to Sinai. You're not on Mount Zion. All right. So he says, therefore, what do you read in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, about a mountain, about a city on top of that? This has nothing to do with heaven. This has nothing to do with future. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ. This is you finding the truth, finding the way, finding life in Jesus Christ by knowing him, by allowing the veil to be removed from your hearts and your minds and your eyes, so you can see him and you can understand the mystery of your union with him. And by doing so, you begin to realize all these beautiful terminologies, symbolic languages, allegories, types and shadows of the Old Testament find their meaning only and only and only in Christ Jesus, and you are in him. So these beautiful stories of mountains and cities and trees and rivers and fountains and all those things have nothing to do with another planet called heaven somewhere. They all have to do with the reality of your life with him. And he says, only under the new covenant you can experience that. Only under freedom you can experience that. Only when you don't subject yourself to the old, you can experience that. All right. Now, we also looked at the fact that basically in Colossians chapter 2, the elements of that world were called the Sabbath, the new moon, the feasts, and all of that, right? And he said, why are you again subjecting yourself to those things? Why do you allow people, other people, teachers, to rob you of your reward, still causing you to be like a slave, waiting for a certain time so that you can receive a blessing from the Lord? Those were all basically shadows, the copies of what was to come. And now this is what was to come. So verse 22, a mountain, then a city, which is the Holy Jerusalem. And it says, the innumerable company of angels, you have come to this, to the general assembly. Okay, this the word general assembly means, or a better translation for this would have been the festal gatherings. A gathering that in the old, under the old, would happen once a year for a certain feast. So people, Jews, wherever they were scattered on this planet, on that specific day, they would come to celebrate that feast in Jerusalem. And he says now that is a spiritual principle, a spiritual reality, spiritual life for us to recognize that we have come to a mountain and that city, Jerusalem, to celebrate the feast. But when? Now. Not in future, not once a year. This is like every day, as many times as you want to celebrate these feasts with the Lord. And what were the feasts of the Lord? The Passover, the unleavened bread, the first fruit, the Pentecost, the trumpet, basically atonement, and the tabernacles, the 7 feasts of the Lord. It says these are the things that you can be partaking of them only, just like John did in Revelation. He was carried in spirit into that high mountain. All right, so in the Spirit. That's why everything about this new covenant is about the Spirit. And your blessing comes from you ascending in the Spirit, and in your descension bringing down the blessing of that spirit realm. All right, so anyways, he says you have come to this mountain, to this city, the heavenly Jerusalem, innumerable company of angels, the festal gatherings of the church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God. So you have come to God, to basically the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect. So this is a spirit gathering. It's a gatherings of the spirits. That's you and that's me. That's those who are recognizing that they are not a living soul anymore. They are life-giving spirits. And they don't identify anymore with the weakness of the soul. They identify with the strength of the spirit. Okay, so that's a different teaching by itself. But to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. So he says, you have come. That means there has to be a reality of these things in our lives. And to the blood of the sprinkling that speaks better things than the blood of Abel. Okay, so he says, you have come to this mountain, to this city, to Jesus, the mediator of the covenant. And you have also come to this festal gathering where you can eat and drink and be merry and rejoice before the presence of the Lord. You know what actually we are reading? Look at the type that was mentioned in the book of Exodus chapter 24, verse 9. It says, then Moses went up also. Moses went up. So you're beginning to see the concept of a mountain. Also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. They went up and they saw the God of Israel. Have you come to this mountain? Have you come to God, the judge of us, to judge of us all? Well, you begin to see that what Hebrews is talking about is the fulfillment in the spirit of that which was once happened to the people of Israel. Look at what we read after that. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. So heaven is not a place. Heaven is where God is. All right, Selah, and think about that for a moment. So when you are in his presence, that's it. Okay, he dwells in the heavens. That means wherever he is the heaven. Verse 11. But on the nobles of the children of Israel he did not lay his hand, so they saw God, and they ate and drank. So you have come also to this mountain, to this festal gathering, a place of feasts where you can eat bread, drink his wine, eat the best meat that could ever be served, to eat of the fatness of his word and drink of his wine of the Spirit. And by doing so, you are basically rejoicing in your God. You're eating from him. You're receiving from him. Verse 12. Then the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and be there. Okay, a bit more ascension. Something beyond even what the children of Israel experienced, the elders of Israel experienced, the 70. Moses is called to even go higher. Okay, these are the languages that are used in the book of Revelation. John hears that there was a voice that called him. He said, come up here. He was already in the Spirit. In fact, if you look at Revelation chapter 1, it says, I was in the Spirit in the Lord's day, and I saw. And then 3 chapters later, once again he hears a voice, come up. So that means he was in the Spirit, but he is called higher in the Spirit. Okay? This is the mountain of the Lord. This is what I said. Mount Zion, I mean the glorious mountain of sonship, where the sons can be with their fathers in his presence and celebrate. Let's continue. Then the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and be there, and I will give you the tablets of stone and the law and, and the commandments which I have written, that you may teach them. So Moses arose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. Verse 16, now the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. Okay, so look at how this Sinai suddenly is replaced by a different mountain in Matthew chapter 16 and 17. Look at chapter 16, 17. Now, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. After 6 days, just like God said to Moses, after the 6th day, God called him up. So he went, and a cloud covered the mountain for that 6 days, and then he went up and he heard God. The glory of God rested on that place. So here we read that the same story. Jesus this time takes his disciples, leads them up by themselves. That means he led them. When he says he led them by themselves, it wasn't like taking their hand and forcing them. He became the one that guided them along the way. That's what it is for you and what's for me. That we are being led by the Spirit to go on this highest realm or highest position in the Spirit. And guess what happens? Verse 2, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them. Moses had experienced this once, but this time he begins to see everything that he received on that mountain concerning the law was pointing at the Christ to come. And now he came to witness that this is the one that God spoke of to me on this mountain, on Sinai. But now the fulfillment of that on Zion. Verse 4, then Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. Mount Zion is the mountain of sonship. Sons dwell on Mount Zion. This is the new covenant. Sons, free, not under the law, not under the bondage of the law, not under any elements. They are the ones that are the master of all. They are the Lord of all. They are the lords over whom Jesus Christ is the Lord. They are the kings over whom Jesus is the king. They are the priests over whom Jesus is the high priest. They are God's kings, God's priests, God's lords on earth. Okay, they receive their strength from him and they walk on earth in that strength. Let's quickly look at let me see if I can find a couple of verses in the Old Testament. Look at the book of Psalm, chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse verse 6. I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. The word hill is mountain. I have set my king on my holy mountain of Zion. Okay, this is Jesus being on this mountain of sonship, and this is where you can meet him. You can ascend and you can meet Jesus Christ in that place. Let me just quickly go actually through some scriptures. Let's look at chapter 43 of the book of Psalm again. Just want to read some verses about the word mountain in the Old Covenant, because I don't know about you, but for me, all these symbologies and language that is in the Old Testament is so precious because it carries within it things that can't be described otherwise. God uses these natural elements of the world to speak of the beauty of our relationship with Him. All right. So for me, that's why it's important to understand what fatness is, what a high mountain is, what a river is, or what a horse is. And without understanding those things, we turn them into once again legalism and end times teachings and things like that. And suddenly, before you know, you're back to Sinai. You're not on Mount Zion. You're not eating and drinking with the God of heaven. You're not ascending higher so that on the tablets of your heart, His new law of the spirit of freedom can be written. Okay, so that's why for me, I would always go back. You can look at my Old Testament Bible or Old Testament portion of my Bible that I have actually circled these things, highlighted these things, have cross references beside them, because I want to know what is this story. And that's why, the scriptures begin to open up for you one by one. So let's look at chapter 43 and verse 3. It says, "Oh, send your light and your truth." Now, this is just amazing. John chapter 1 says, He was the light that was coming to the world, that gives light to every man. John chapter 14 says, I am the way, all right, and the truth. Now, both of them are in this verse. Oh, send your light and your truth. Send Jesus, basically. Let them lead me. Let Jesus lead me. Doesn't it say that He led them up by themselves on this high mountain? And then it was where the cloud appeared, the voice of God was heard. So it says the light and truth will lead you on this mountain, Jesus. Follow Him and you will be on this high mountain. Let them bring me to your holy mountain and to your tabernacle. Okay, so the mountain of the Lord, the Mount Zion, is His also tabernacle. It's where He dwells. God dwells on this mountain. Okay, God dwells in the midst of His sons. 2 Corinthians chapter 7 says, come out from among them, says the Lord, and be separate. And just as it was written, they shall be my sons, I shall be their father, and I will dwell in their midst. Okay, God, our Father, would dwell in the midst of His sons. Also look at chapter 48 of the book of Psalm, verse 1. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. No need for explanation. In His holy mountain, beautiful in elevation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north. Romans chapter 8 speaks of these sons that are the hope of this creation. Mount Zion, they are the hope of this creation. Creation is waiting for the manifestation of sons of God. They're groaning, in fact, for this. And then he goes on to say, the city of the great King. Okay, so everything that we desire, this blood of the new covenant, the righteousness, the just spirits, the mediator of the new covenant, the innumerable company of messengers that bring the gospel, the basically the city of God, the festal gatherings of the saints together, all of them in one place called Mount Zion, New Covenant, Mountain of Sonship. All right, so let's look at a couple more other verses. Same chapter, verse 11. Says, let the Mount Zion rejoice and let the daughters of Judah be glad because of your judgment. Walk about Zion and go all around her, count her towers. And then he goes on to say, basically what I wanted you to see, verse 11, let the Mount Zion rejoice. Okay, this is again a place of feasting, a place of enjoying the Passover, the unleavened bread. It's a place of rejoicing in the work that God has done. And he says that's when you are eating and drinking like the elders of Israel, and you can be like Moses amongst them, that because of that strength of that eating and drinking, you can go even higher, and then you can have the law of the Lord being written in your heart, and that would cause you to be the one from whom the law of the Lord shall go forth. The word of the Lord shall go forth. Okay, and everyone thirsts for the word of the Lord. You shall be the one that from whom this shall go forth. Okay, so let's see what else we can find. Chapter 74. Psalm chapter 74. Verse 2, remember your congregation which you have purchased of old, the tribe of your inheritance which you have redeemed. This Mount Zion where you have dwelt. Okay, God dwells on Mount Zion. This is the tribe of Judah. He's basically the tribe of inheritance. These are the ones that actually come to Jerusalem. They are the kings on this city. All right, so these are all, by the way, I'm reading these things not because they're great scriptures to read. These speak of you. Okay, these speak of you as the one who has come to this mountain, to Mount Zion, to this new covenant. And because of that, you're not anymore under the law. You're under this blood that constantly keeps you in that place, purges your conscience so you don't descend, you remain ascended. Even 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 speaks of a voice like a shout of a trumpet that causes you to be caught up with the Lord in the air, and thus you shall be with him forever. To be in the same air that the Lord himself dwells in. To be breathing the same air that the only thing that in it is in existence is the Lord himself. So he becomes literally the air that you breathe in. You see, these things have nothing to do with that old way of understanding these scriptures. These are symbolic, and I hope that you're blessed by hearing these things. Okay, so let me see if there is something else that I can quickly find out. I wanted to read something for you from Psalm. Isaiah chapter 33, verse 5. The Lord is exalted, for he dwells on high. He has filled Zion with justice and righteousness. He has filled Zion with justice and with righteousness. Look at verse 20. Look upon Zion, the city of the appointed feasts. I mean, that's just amazing. These things, this book can be written possibly without the inspiration of God. To see things that are mentioned here, and you come to the New Testament and you find the reality of them. Zion is the city of the appointed feast. Just like Hebrews 12 says, you have come to this site, Zion, the festal gathering, the place of feasts. Okay? Your eyes will see Jerusalem, a quiet home, a tabernacle that will not be taken down. Not one of its stakes will ever be removed, nor will any of its cords be broken. But let me just continue, it's beautiful. But there the majestic Lord will be for us a place of broad rivers and streams, in which no galley with oars will sail, nor majestic ships pass by. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. He will save us. Okay, this is where you're not anymore under guardians, you're not under the tutors, you're not under the stewards, you are free from them. You are under, because the time appointed by the Father has come, he sent his Son, you're free, now you're being taught by the Lord himself. Jesus said, in fact, in John chapter 6, when he said that if you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you shall have life. And they said, who can accept these things? He said, well, it was written that everyone shall be taught by God. So basically he was saying, this is it. God is teaching you by my flesh and my blood that is being given to you, so you can eat and you can drink and you can come closer to God. This is the teaching of God, that through the Son, the firstborn Son, you can experience sonship. And God will teach you through His Son. On the Mount of Transfiguration, the voice was, "Hear my Son," not the law and the prophets. He's the one who echoes the voice of the Father. He's the one through whom the voice of God is even heard, as it's supposed to be heard. All right? And all right, so I think that's about it. Let me see if there was anything else. So perhaps we can look at, okay, yeah, Psalm 84, and I will end by this. It says, "How lovely is your tabernacle, O Lord of hosts." The tabernacle of the Lord. Check Revelation chapter 21. Then Jerusalem comes on Mount Zion. It is said, "Now the tabernacle of God is with man." So what is the tabernacle of God? Is Jerusalem. What is that? It's you, the bride of Christ. And how lovely is this tabernacle of the Lord? My soul longs, yes, even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They will still be praising you. Selah. Blessed is the man whose strength is in you. Wow. Whose heart is set on pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is, I know this because of, my background in Islam. There was a pilgrimage for Muslims once a year that they would go to, wherever they were, they would go to Saudi Arabia, to this city, Mecca, and that's where they thought it's the house of God, and they would begin to go around a stone, and they would kind of celebrate all of that. That was called the pilgrimage. And he says, now, blessed is the man whose strength is in you, whose heart is set on pilgrimage. So where are they going? If they're going on, this man is going to a pilgrimage. Verse 6, as they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a spring. The rain also covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. Do you see ascension? From strength to strength, from elevation to elevation. Each one appears before God in Zion. That's just amazing. So they appear, they ascend because they will appear before Him. God is calling us to Mount Zion. He's calling us just He called the elders of Israel and Moses. And He's even calling us higher, just as He called Moses. And the proof of that is Revelation chapter 4. It says, I saw a door open in heaven, and the first voice that I heard was like a trumpet saying, come up here, and I will show you things which must shortly take place after this. And suddenly I saw a throne, and one sat on the throne whose glory was like a rainbow, and all of that. And he said, this was where God dwells. This is the throne of God. This is that kingdom that we are talking about. We say kingdom, kingdom, kingdom. Where is that kingdom? What is that kingdom? Well, the book of Revelation gives us a beautiful expression and definitions, and through the symbolic language of what that is. So we are called to go from strength to strength. How? He says, the man whose strength is in you. So the Lord Himself becomes the one upon whom we walk. He becomes the steps upon whom we walk upward. He becomes the ladder upon whom we go forward. If you walk or mount up on Jesus, that would be Him leading you by yourself into the very presence of the God of heaven. Isn't that beautiful? He said that basically He was the fulfillment, or He is the fulfillment of Jacob's ladder. A ladder whose feet was on earth, whose top was in heaven. And he said, to Nathanael, he said, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So he was that ladder. He is that ladder for us to go on this mountain. He himself is on the top of the mountain as the God of heaven, but he also is the ladder to get us there. Didn't he say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through me? I mean, it's just beautiful. I can't go on anymore. Please enjoy it and just go through your discussion. I believe that this would be an amazing day for all of you who are going through these small groups, and you will have great discussions. Bless you guys. I'll see you in the next week.